Guramahagut Vincent agus sa céad dul sios bhailm fáilte mór a chur ribh Basil agus a cuid cóirde ansa I Kirky. I want to start by just extending a very warm Cork welcome, says Mia Dub, which actually is the centre of the universe. That actually could prove the point of contention this morning. To Basil and to his colleagues, and a word of deep appreciation for joining us here today for what I know will prove to be a very worthwhile and interesting conversation. I'm always dubious of a political argument that views a proposition and says, that's all right, but not now. That sets an alarm bell off in my head. And let me tell you why. If we view the political history of our country, north and south, and you could go beyond Ireland to see this phenomenon, what you find is that great leaps forward in terms of social or indeed economic progress have always had the prelude of, that might be okay, but maybe just not now. And if that argument in itself were to carry the day, who knows, women mightn't have the vote. Black people might not have full equality in legislative terms. So I actually, with the greatest of respect to Basil, don't buy that as a response to a proposition for reunification of Ireland. I don't think that the timing response actually cuts the mustard, and we'll discuss that, I've no doubt, further on. I'm equally troubled by a political response that says, well, that might all be well and good, but you don't rock the boat. That's a bit radical. Because equally, and I say this as an Irish woman, if we had taken that view, let me tell you, women certainly wouldn't have had the vote. And lots of the big leaps forward in terms of human rights and dignity and progress, indeed even scientific and economic advances, simply wouldn't have happened if we worked on that, let's say, overly cautious conservative view. So I want to debate the merits of reuniting our country, not on some false premise around, is the time right, yes or no? Is it too radical or dangerous, yes or no? I want us to take a couple of steps back and say, well, is there substance to the argument that says that this is in the common good? Now, I have no doubt that for very many people the issue of Irish unity is indeed an emotive one. I mean, I grew up, for instance, in Dublin, in an Ireland that had as its background noise the Northern Troubles. I have to tell you that I, as a person, and my personal life wasn't impinged upon because of the conflict in the north. Unlike somebody who, by happenstance, was born in Andersonstown or in the Bogside, I happened to be born on the south side of Dublin, so I didn't have that, immediate contact with the conflict and with the troubles in the north. But nonetheless, it formed part of the narrative and the spine of the Ireland that I grew up in. It was the background noise, and sometimes it was the unspoken issue that polite society in the south simply didn't want to talk about, but it was there nonetheless, and censorship or not, you couldn't censor that reality away. And I'm conscious now, as I stand before you, now as a mother of young children, that I look at the scene in Ireland, north and south, and you see something utterly different and transformed. And I would reckon that if you had said to people 20 years ago that all of this would come to pass, they would have said that you were, delusional, perhaps, that you were overly optimistic, that might be dangerous, that the time wouldn't have been right for that, and that would be far too radical. But here we are. All of the politics around the peace process has unfolded and has been driven before our eyes. And for all the progress we've made, the issue of unity is nonetheless emotive still. And why is it emotive? I suppose because so many people from a nationalist and a Republican perspective over generations, over centuries now, have struggled and died and committed and given everything to a vision and a view of what Ireland can be, what a free, democratic Ireland can be, what we can achieve for ourselves, but also on the international stage. And it's also emotive because people from a different tradition have, for a very long time, resisted that notion, either because they viewed it as a threat, or perhaps because they viewed it as something less than worthwhile. But emotive it is. I want to take this opportunity and in this forum to say to Basil, and by extension to others who are unionist in their outlook, that our purpose in Sinn Féin is not simply to manipulate an emotive issue. That's not what we're at here. Why on earth would anybody waste their time on something as petty as that? Our commitment to and our struggle for Irish unity is based entirely on our genuine belief that this is in the common interest, that this is the manner and the map to deliver for everybody, not just for us. And you very often hear Republicans, particularly those of an age who lived through history in the 6 counties, you'll hear them say, we don't want done to others that which was done to us. I've heard that. I've lost count of the number of seasoned, let's just say, Republicans who will say that out loud. And we need to say it out loud again. The purpose of the journey towards Irish unity is not to get some form of revenge, not to prove that we were right and you were wrong. That's not what this is about. This is about social, economic and political progress. This is about democracy in Ireland. It's about equality in Ireland. And perhaps above all, it's about capturing the immense potential that we have north and south in our people and in our resources. That's what this is about. And yet it remains an emotive issue. But when we look at the facts and figures on an economic level, perhaps that can take some of the emotion away from the argument and introduce a level of logic and good common sense, which I believe is necessary. So what would the better united Ireland look like? Basil will tell you that, look, the systems have post-partition grown so far apart that really it's too much hassle to try and stitch them back together again or to reform them. I couldn't disagree more. I say that respectfully to you, Basil. See, it's no comfort to you if you're unemployed in Ballymurphy or in Ballymun. You know, an argument that says, well, sorry people, the systems have grown. That's not a good response. We need to look at every system across the country, whether it's in healthcare provision, which is the specific instance that Basil raised, and say, how are we doing that and how are we delivering that service and how do we do it better? That's the question. Be very clear that in the southern state, the health system is broken. It's chaotic and it is not delivering for citizens. We know that. In the north, you may argue that it's better. You have the whole concept of a national healthcare system. All of that is to the good. And the trick in terms of good service provision is to identify the bad practice, identify the deficits, identify the positives where they exist, and bring those to bear across the country. That to me is the logical and rational thing to do. I imagine anybody here who lives on the border, in a border constituency or in a border community will know at first hand the kinds of contradictions that you deal with on a daily basis, because there are two systems, because there are two currencies, because there are two taxation systems. People live that out on a daily basis. And you know, no reasonable person if they landed from Mars, or reasonable Martian if they landed from Mars, and surveyed the scene of a small island and looked at what we were doing, nobody would stand over it and say, do you know what, that's the best way to do it, because quite frankly, it's not. And leave aside your ideology, leave aside issues of identity, all of which are absolutely crucial, but park those for a moment and take a step back and survey the scene. Is anybody seriously suggesting on a small landmass, on a small island with a small population, that it makes sense to have two of everything? That's, as the fellow would say, a little bit Irish. It doesn't, it simply doesn't add up. And all of us know the kind of dilemmas that we have faced in the South. I don't propose to give you a rant on the Anglo bankers, the banksters and their moolah, but the call for Irish unity isn't a call for an extended free state. It's not a call for an extension of the status quo. It's actually a challenge for something completely new and different, and agreed, and that bit matters too. I don't see my job as an Irish Republican to sell the southern state to our Unionist brothers and sisters. I wouldn't insult their intelligence or their dignity by attempting that particular venture. We know perhaps better than most what the difficulties and dilemmas are. We know, for instance, that at the time of partition, not alone was a reactionary, oppressive state created in the 6 northeastern counties of our country, but a repressive and reactionary state was created in the remaining 26. That's a state, that's a matter of historical fact. So we're not salesmen and women for the glorious South. What we are political activists saying, in the best tradition of Irish republicanism, that united we are stronger, that together we can create something new and better and equal and democratic, in which nobody's identity is threatened, in which civil and religious liberties are respected, in which the aspirations of all are recognised, appreciated and nurtured. We can do all of that. I believe that we can do all of that, and I also believe in our lifetime we will do all of that, because I think the time is right now for a real shift in the political landscape. And to that end, I welcome the fact that not alone that Basil and his colleagues are here with us today, but that they have struck out on their own terms and in their own way a new chapter in the politics, the political landscape in the North. Whether or not we have a border poll at this time excites, you know, mixed reactions. I was up in South Armagh a couple of months ago at this stage, and we had a debate on this matter. And there were different views. Those of a Unionist perspective clearly argued that now was not the time, and others argued with more urgency that now is the time. I think rather than us getting hung up on a date for a border poll, we need to look at the political substance of what we're proposing. We want to have the conversation amongst ourselves and between ourselves around not just the pathway to unity, the challenges to get to a united people in a united country, but also to imagine for ourselves what that might look like. Because that will be a contested matter too. People will come at this with different perspectives in terms of political institutions, in terms of constitutional rights and freedoms. People will have views on all of that, and we want to have that debate. What does the Ireland of tomorrow look like? How does it function? How does it operate? Who does it protect? Who does it hold accountable? How do we give our children the chances that they deserve in their country, north or south, to live here, to work here, to build their families here? How do we do all of that? And I think that that's a conversation that has to have a unionist voice, unionist voices front and centre, along with ourselves from the Republican and nationalist community. Britain is our biggest trading partner. You'd expect that. We're next door neighbours. That is absolutely true. The relationship between Ireland and Britain has improved. I don't want to sound like Enda Kenny and the rest of them to say relations have never been better between our two peoples and our two islands. You know that political speak. But there's truth in that. And that's a very, very good thing. Because so many Irish people, as we know, have made their lives and contributed hugely to Britain. They built Britain, much as the Irish built America. So I think if we're going to have an honest conversation about all of these matters, that we shouldn't hide behind timing issues, or we shouldn't at the first breath strike a note of not panic, but of deep caution around these issues. Who's afraid of unity? Who's afraid of progress? Who's afraid of democracy? Who's afraid of equality? That can't threaten any person of goodwill. And I don't care what your political stripe is. And that's the challenge. That's the challenge for us. I would like us to see a border poll in the lifetime of the next Assembly. We will campaign for that, not to be divisive, but to be provocative in the best sense of that word. Because we have to provoke the debate. We have to start the conversation. And those who are of a unionist view are of course absolutely entitled to that political position. But just as we have to defend our position on unity, those that claim an allegiance to the union equally have to defend the union. And there's a challenge in that, if I may say so, for them. So how do you challenge a system in which you have a relationship of absolute dependency on Westminster, on a block grant, where at the whim of politicians and a system not elected on any part of this island, that funding can be cut or stopped? How is that a good thing? Does unionism wear as a badge of honour the fact that we are reliant on the block grant and therefore we cannot move? How is that a strong position? We shouldn't be reliant on anyone. Which leads us to my final point. It drives me mad when when the name of our party is deliberately mistranslated. Ourselves alone. You've all heard that, Sinn Féin. That's not what Sinn Féin means at all. It's a deliberate mistranslation. Sinn Féin means we, ourselves. And it's an expression of the collective. It's an expression of confidence. It's an expression of ability. It's an expression of unity. It's a definition that excludes nobody, be you Protestant, Catholic, dissenter, Muslim, atheist, doesn't matter. We, ourselves, not ourselves alone. This isn't about being isolationist. It's not about being elitist. It's not about saying to people, we were right and you were wrong, that finally we've gotten our way and we are victorious and you are vanquished. That's not what this is about at all. This is about our families, our communities, our economy, our society, our democracy. It's about who we are, and it's about being the best Ireland that we can be, north and south, unionist and nationalist, republican and loyalist. And I firmly believe that if you want change in Ireland, if you want progress, if you want prosperity on a sustainable basis, the only way that we can deliver that is through a programme directed at Irish reunification. A divided Ireland, north and south, A failed state in the north, a failed state in the south cannot deliver for us the future that we and our children deserve. Gramaig.